Now, with more on the looming tariffs, is Vivek Ashvansh, Associate Professor of Quantitative Marketing and Analytics at McGill University. Professor, it's good to have you tonight. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having me on the show, Lindsay.
So I want to focus, first of all, on oil, because Donald Trump has said that he will decide tonight whether oil will be included in those tariffs. If it were to be included, just how devastating would that be for Canada?
It will be devastating for crude oil exporters and producers in Canada, particularly Alberta. It might be devastating for lay consumers such as you and me in Canada, provided the Canadian federal government imposes a retaliatory tariff, which might increase the prices of commodities in Canada.
I think that's important to note, right? Because some Canadians in Toronto, for example, might be wondering how oil that's mostly produced in Alberta, tariffs on that oil would really affect them. So can you break down even further just how this would affect, the everyday Canadian?
So let's play this out. Suppose you are a producer or exporter of crude oil located in Alberta, and I am a refinery located in the northern or mountain states of the United States. So currently I import crude oil from you, and I refine it and send it to several states in the United States and back to Canada. As of now, I pay zero tariff to the US federal government. Now, Donald Trump is suggesting that he will impose a 25% tariff, which means that I, and not you, will have to pay the 25% of the dollar amount of the imported crude oil. Now, if I am paying if I'm paying taxes or tariffs to the US federal government, my profit will go down, which means I have two recourses. One, I renegotiate with you and ask you to sell me the crude oil at lower prices, or I increase the prices of petroleum or gasoline that I sell to end consumers in the United States. What will likely happen is perhaps a mix of both, which means that the prices of petroleum or gasoline will increase in the United States, and I may renegotiate with you to sell me crude oil at lower prices. And that is where the exporters and producers of crude oil in Canada, particularly Alberta, will be negatively impacted. And the prices of gasoline in America, particularly the mountain and northern states, might go up.
Okay, that's a good breakdown. And, for Canadians who are listening to this as well, how quickly would Canadians actually feel the impact of the tariffs?
If we go only by the proposed increase in crude oil imports, then Canadians would not be impacted. But what we've seen the federal government of Canada and the provincial government state is that they will impose retaliatory tariff on goods and services that Canada imports from America. If that were to happen, and that happened in 2017, 2018, when a similar sequence of events had unfolded. So if that were to happen, then Canadians will have to pay higher prices. So in 2018, we saw that the prices of alcoholic beverages, dairy products had shot up, and Canadians did not know why the prices are going up. So that will be a factor that Canadian federal and provincial government should take care of. And one would logically hope that Donald Trump is considering that as well. The interesting bit is that the average price at which Alberta sells crude oil to Canada is currently lower than the average price that Oklahoma, there's some entity in Oklahoma that comes up with the price. So Canada is actually selling crude oil at lower prices. And if Donald Trump were to consider whether Canada is treating America fairly, then he would not impose the 25% tariff.
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, many economists say the reason the U.S. buys so much of Canada's oil is because it's cheaper, so then Americans can have cheaper gas prices, for example. So this, in the end, would ultimately maybe hurt Americans too, right?
It will, and particularly because Donald Trump had been arguing that his purpose is to decrease the gasoline prices. And I remember some survey which reported that 60 to 80% Americans feel that the gasoline prices need to come down. And that was one of the promises that Trump made in his election rallies.
So just before we wrap up here, Donald Trump has been saying that these tariffs are coming into play because of border security, but also he keeps saying that Canada and Mexico have been treating the U.S. very unfairly when it comes to trade. Do you agree with that? What do you think about that statement?
That's not true. He uses terms such as subsidy and deficit. And the actual deficit in 2024 was, I think, $41 billion, whereas I have heard him come up with numbers such as $175 billion 200, 250, 200, and 300 billion. Also, the concept of trade deficit or trade imbalance is routine, and it does not mean that the national security of United States is impacted. But then people don't think by logic. They think by emotions, and they know what sells in the market of politics. So as I say, this is theater, and it is serving some people.
Theater and politics. Okay, Vivek Ashvansh, Associate Professor of Quantitative Marketing and Analytics at McGill University. Thanks so much for your time tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Lindsay. Bye for now.
Thanks. Meanwhile, Trump's cabinet